Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have David DeWalt, co-founder and managing director of NightDragon, a venture capital firm investing in innovative growth in late-stage companies within the cybersecurity, safety, security, and privacy industry to discuss the top cybersecurity categories that are emerging right now. David, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Jill, thanks for having me back on Nasdaq again. It's great to be here.
You got it. And we've seen rapid shifts in the investment landscape over the past 6 months, 2 years, especially when it comes to valuation and investment. How have you seen that play out in the cybersecurity landscape?
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity, as you know, Jill, is a pretty incredible market segment. We've seen some of the largest growth by all the companies, public and private, that we've ever seen. I've been in this market for over 20 years. We're seeing hyperscale in ways that we've never seen before. Companies like Palo Alto Networks, CrowdStrike, Zscaler, all having record quarters, record billings and revenue, cash flows, etc. Microsoft announced they had 15 billion in revenue in the past 12 months for security as well. Google's acquisition of Mandiant for 5.4 billion. You know, obviously this is a big sector, a big market. Even though there's a little contraction in the public valuations, despite all that growth, cybersecurity continues to be a very large grower, 4 times faster than even IT. So big segment. Yeah.
Why do you think cybersecurity as a category has largely maintained its growth against the current economic environment?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of boils down to a simple concept, and that's the threat environment. You know, the last 2 years or so, particularly from the pandemic onward, we've seen one crisis after another that really end up manifesting themselves in the cyber domain. So think about everybody working from home and working from everywhere. You know, suddenly it became a bigger attack surface for the bad guys to go after people. Now the networks have shifted into cloud-based networking. We had crises like culture and elections and you know all kinds of interesting conflicts around the world. You know, from a cyber point of view, Russia, Ukraine. You know, we started to see warfare in the cyber domain really manifests itself for the first time in the history of that domain. So the threat environment continues to escalate at the highest levels, from terrorism to crime, espionage to warfare. That drives customer spend, which then drives investors to look into this segment. So threat environment's the simple answer.
Yeah, and David, with the valuation reset that we've seen over the past 12 to 18 months, as an investor, how do you evaluate where you're putting capital to work with the companies you're investing in?
Yeah, Jill, I mean, NightDragon's really focused on investment and advisory. As you said, cyber, national security, safety, and privacy. Always got to have a good acronym. CSSP is ours. But we look for the biggest dislocations, we like to say, between the threat and the risk and what commercial defense is available. So as you think about supply chain or satellite safety and security, or even our 911 system, or in the cyber domains or industrial security, wherever there's a really big threat gap to what is being provided commercially, that's where we like to invest. Then we like to invest in companies who are in the growth stage and eventually on the Nasdaq IPO platform and listings platform. So a lot of inertia where we try to hyperscale companies with an operational background, but we very strategically pick market segments.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you had mentioned that when you think about the top emerging cyber categories that you're watching right now, you had mentioned supply chain, physical security, other areas outside of what we traditionally think of as technology. And that's interesting to me, how it's being deployed in many different verticals.
Yeah, Jill, I mean, that's the future now, right? I call it future fusion for a reason, because we're seeing the fusing of multiple domains, all sort of creating cyber ubiquity into those domains. So you think about satellite infrastructure that I mentioned. I mean, low Earth orbits now are a particular infrastructure that's critically important to everything that's connecting from cars to planes to watches to phones. And then you start to think about air and drones and delivery of drones. And then supply chain. Can we trust our supply chain? Physical risk manifesting itself in cyber risk. So there's all kinds of tangential spaces making the cybersecurity market get into the hundreds of billions. Now 400 billion a year, if you really look at the totality of this space. But the losses in the cyber domain and the physical threat domain are in the trillions. So you still have this asymmetric theater, which is going to create continued growth in our market segment.
Yeah, I would agree with you, especially when you think about newer technologies like Meta and AR and all these different types of realities where we're going to be collecting more data than we ever have before. I mean, it just opens up more of an opportunity for cyber threats and, of course, for cybersecurity companies to grow.
Yeah, you bet. And, that big data and that big cloud and these hyperscalers now that are creating opportunities for companies to grow tremendously fast. And, in the intro there, I was the CEO of FireEye and then Mandiant. But we were able to take FireEye from relatively small, like 10 million in revenue, to $1 billion in revenue in 3 years. And that was back in 2013 to 16 window. Now you have even bigger infrastructure, even bigger markets of cyber. So you're going to start to see companies be able to scale from small tens of millions of revenue into billions of revenue relatively quickly. What an opportunity for investors, frankly.
Yeah, for sure. All right, David, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.